My name is Adil, 29 years old, a mid-level financial analyst at a Karachi-based firm. I've always been the quiet type, methodical, dependable, invisible. I kept my head down, did the work, and avoided office politics. I wasn't flashy, but I was consistent. And in the corporate world, consistency is supposed to count for something. The office was a sleek, glass-walled space on the 12th floor of a high-rise in Clifton. The kind of place that smelled of fresh coffee and ambition. My desk was near the window, offering a panoramic view of the city, a view I rarely appreciated, too engrossed in spreadsheets and financial reports. My boss, Mr. Cameron, was a man of stature, both literally and figuratively. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a voice that commanded attention. He had a reputation for being tough but fair. At least, that's what I thought. It started subtly. One Monday morning, during our weekly team meeting, Cameron made a joke about my tie. Adil, did you get dressed in the dark today? The room erupted in laughter. I forced a smile, cheeks burning. It was just a joke, right? TheCelebritist.com. But then, it became a pattern. Adil, maybe you should stick to numbers. Fashion isn't your forte. Adil, your report was so dull, I used it as a sleep aid. Each comment was met with laughter, and each time, I laughed along, trying to hide the sting. Good novel. I began to notice that my ideas were often dismissed in meetings, only to be praised when echoed by someone else. My contributions were overlooked, my efforts unacknowledged. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was being too sensitive. Maybe I needed to toughen up. Good novel. But the unease grew. Web novel. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I overheard Cameron talking to another manager. Adil? He's reliable but lacks initiative. Not leadership material. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always prided myself on my work ethic, my dedication. To hear my boss dismiss me so casually was devastating. I spent that night tossing and turning, replaying the conversation in my head. Was I really that insignificant? The next day, I approached Cameron, hoping for some clarification. Sir, I wanted to discuss my performance. Is there something I should be improving? He looked up from his computer, a smirk playing on his lips. Adil, you're doing fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. His tone was dismissive, his eyes devoid of any genuine interest. I nodded and left his office, feeling more confused than ever. Over the next few weeks, the situation worsened. Cameron's comments became more pointed, his tone more condescending. He began assigning me menial tasks, ones far below my skill level. He would publicly question my competence, making me the butt of his jokes. I felt humiliated, degraded. My confidence eroded, and I began to doubt my abilities. I confided in a colleague, Sarah, hoping for some support. Sarah, have you noticed how Cameron treats me? She hesitated before responding. Adil, I have. It's not right, but confronting him might make things worse. Her words offered little comfort. I considered going to HR, but the fear of retaliation held me back. Cameron was influential, and I was just an analyst. One Friday afternoon, as I was preparing to leave, Cameron called me into his office. Adil, I need you to stay late and finish this report. It's due Monday. I looked at the thick stack of documents he handed me. Sir, I had plans this evening. Could I work on it over the weekend? He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. If you can't handle the workload, perhaps this isn't the right place for you. The implication was clear. I nodded, took the documents, and returned to my desk. As I worked late into the night, I realized that this wasn't just about a report. It was about control, about power. That night, as I walked home through the quiet streets, a thought took root in my mind. I couldn't continue like this. Something had to change. I didn't know what I would do, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let Cameron break me. After that Friday night, something in me changed. It wasn't sudden like flipping a switch, but gradual, like a tide slowly pulling away from the shore. I started paying attention, not just to Cameron's comments, but to his actions, his timing, the way he interacted with others. I began to notice a pattern. Whenever I submitted a report, it would either go missing or be returned with exaggerated criticism. Yet, When others turned in similar work, they were praised. Cameron never outright yelled or insulted me. It was all passive, subtle, and cruelly calculated. Then came the sudden change in team structure. Cameron brought in someone new, Bilal. Younger, flashier, and oddly chummy with Cameron from day one. Everyone meet Bilal. He's joining us as a senior consultant, Cameron had announced with that smug smile. Senior consultant, I had been working toward that position for 2 years. I had submitted the application months ago, gone through the internal review. Cameron told me they had decided to pause promotions this quarter. And now this. I felt the burn of betrayal, but I kept it hidden. I greeted Bilal politely, even helped him get set up. But inside, something didn't sit right. Bilal acted friendly, too friendly. He would ask me about clients I'd worked with, request access to files I had created, inquire about internal processes in a way that felt less like curiosity and more like replacement. One evening, I stayed behind after everyone left. I pretended to be finishing up, but I waited until the cleaning staff came in and the silence settled over the office. I slipped into the conference room where Bilal had held a closed-door session with Cameron earlier that day. I checked the whiteboard. There were initials, project names, mine among them with arrows pointing to Bilal's name. My responsibilities were being reassigned, one by one. I took photos with my phone and left quickly, heart racing. The next day, I watched from the corner of my eye as Cameron and Bilal whispered like conspirators, occasionally glancing my way. It became undeniable. They were phasing me out. And yet, Cameron continued to maintain a facade. A deal. Could you do a quick analysis on last quarter's performance? I complied. But this time, I embedded a trace, one that would notify me if the file was copied or opened under another name. 2 days later, I got the ping. Bilal had used my report, changed the cover sheet, and submitted it as his own. That was the turning point. I printed both versions, the original and Bilal's forgery. I needed evidence, not just suspicions. Over the next week, I built a quiet case. Emails, reports, time logs. I documented every insult, every reassigned task, every instance of stolen credit. Meanwhile, Cameron continued to test me, as if daring me to react. You should learn something from Bilal. He's proactive, confident. Maybe spend some time shadowing him. I nodded, outwardly composed. Inside, I was boiling. I began to suspect this wasn't random office politics. It felt orchestrated, a quiet campaign to push me out without firing me. Death by 1,000 cuts. One day, Sarah approached me in the break room. I don't want to cause drama, she said in a hushed tone, but I overheard Cameron on a call. He said he was trying to make space for someone from his network. Someone? She glanced around. Bilal. Apparently, they go way back. College friends or cousins, I couldn't catch the whole thing. I exhaled slowly. It made sense now. This wasn't about my performance. It was nepotism disguised as meritocracy. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal, it was how quietly, systematically, and professionally it was done. I realized if I didn't act soon, I'd be pushed out with nothing to show for it. No severance, no reference. Just a whisper of, he couldn't keep up. So I began to prepare, not for revenge, not yet. But for defense. For dignity. I cleaned up my online presence. Updated my CV. Reached out discreetly to old contacts, former supervisors. And I watched. Every interaction. Every paper trail. It's a strange feeling, pretending to be oblivious while being more alert than ever. But I knew I couldn't strike, yet. Not until I had enough to expose the truth completely. Cameron and Bilal were good at the game. But I had spent years working quietly in the shadows. Numbers were my world, and numbers don't lie. The pressure was building. It wasn't just about Cameron and Bilal anymore, it was everything. The silence in meetings when I spoke. The way projects that were mine somehow ended up on Bilal's desk. The jokes whispered when I passed by. The passive-aggressive emails, always CCing upper management, designed to make me look incompetent. And then came the performance review. I had been waiting for it. Not with excitement, but dread. Still, I had hope. A small, stubborn part of me believed that maybe, just maybe, someone higher up would notice the pattern. The inconsistency. Cameron sat across from me, calm, rehearsed. A deal, he said, folding his hands. I want to be transparent with you. We've noticed a drop in your initiative. You've been disengaged. I blinked. Disengaged? You're not leading the way you used to. Your reports are okay, but not exceptional. Frankly, Bilal has been outperforming expectations. I bit the inside of my cheek.
Hard.
I see, I said carefully. And we're restructuring the team again, Cameron continued. Some of your accounts will be transitioned over. To Bilal? I asked, already knowing the answer. He didn't flinch.
Yes.
Temporarily, of course. Just until we can reevaluate your role. I nodded, standing up slowly. Thanks for the feedback. He looked slightly thrown off. Maybe he expected me to argue.
Beg.
Explode. But I didn't. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced. I reread every file, every screenshot, every email I had archived. My evidence folder was thick now. Time-stamped. Organized. And I had enough. But something inside me cracked, not from weakness, but from a clarity so sharp it cut through the fog. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to reveal everything. The next day, I called in sick. Spent hours putting together the report. Not a complaint. A forensic-level audit of my work, my contributions, my communications, and the discrepancies in Bilal's. It included date-stamped files he had rebranded as his. Emails from Cameron subtly undermining my work. Project timelines showing when tasks were reassigned after I had done the heavy lifting. Sarah's quiet testimonial. I accessed logs proving Bilal was using my credentials to duplicate content. I added a cover letter. Direct, calm, professional. I addressed it to Human Resources. CC'd Cameron. And, critically, CC'd Mr. Siddiqui, our regional director. A man known for fairness and not easily manipulated. Then I sent it. And waited. 3 days passed. Silence. Cameron didn't mention it. But the tension in the office changed. People looked at me differently. Not with mockery, but with caution. On the 4th day, I got the invite. Subject: Performance and HR Review. Location: Conference Room A. Attendees: Adil Khan, Cameron Malik, HR Representative, Mr. Siddiqui. I didn't smile. I just prepared. The day of the meeting, I walked in with a slim black folder in my hand. Inside it was everything the digital version already sent and now physical proof. Cameron looked too calm. Overconfident. But when Mr. Siddiqui walked in, he nodded politely at me and gave Cameron a longer, unreadable glance. Let's begin, the HR rep said. Cameron started with his usual charm. There have been growing concerns around Adil's alignment with the team's vision. Mr. Siddiqui held up a hand. We've reviewed the report. We'll start there. Cameron's face twitched. For the first time, he looked uncertain. What report? He asked. My heart thudded. So he hadn't read it. The one Adil submitted, Mr. Siddiqui said sharply. The one with documented evidence of professional misconduct, data plagiarism, and potential policy violations. Cameron opened his mouth, but no words came. I leaned forward, voice steady. I'd like to walk everyone through it. And I did. For 20 minutes, I went point by point. Every manipulated document. Every instance of misrepresentation. Every time I was quietly erased from my own work. Cameron tried to interrupt. This is a misunderstanding. But the HR rep cut him off. Mr. Malik, please wait until he finishes. When I was done, the room was heavy with silence. Mr. Siddiqui looked at Cameron, eyes sharp. Do you deny these claims? Cameron stammered. Some of these files, Bilal submitted them. I assumed they were his. You assumed? Mr. Siddiqui's tone darkened. You signed off on them. With your credentials. You claimed them as department output. The HR rep turned to me. Thank you, Adil. We'll conduct a formal inquiry. Effective immediately, you'll be reporting directly to the regional office while this is underway. Cameron looked like he'd swallowed a stone. I stood, nodded, and walked out. No applause. No dramatic music. Just quiet, earned dignity. But that wasn't the end. A few days later, word spread like wildfire. Cameron had been suspended. Bilal's contract was terminated. People who had avoided me now looked at me with respect, or shame. Sarah caught up with me in the hallway. "I knew you were smart," she whispered. "But that was masterful." I smiled faintly. It wasn't revenge. It was the truth. And the truth always finds a way. The days after the HR review were a blur. I had gone through the motions, checking in with the regional office, answering emails, and getting familiar with my new role. It was a strange mix of relief and apprehension. I had done it. The fight was over on the surface. But there was still something gnawing at me. A sense of unfinished business. Cameron had been suspended, but that wasn't enough. He needed to face consequences beyond the office walls. I could feel that nagging discomfort in my chest. I wasn't just looking for justice. I wanted retribution. Then, out of nowhere, the second bombshell dropped. I had been so focused on exposing Cameron's manipulation, I hadn't realized just how deep the network of deceit ran. It came in the form of an email from a name I hadn't seen in months. Rena. Rena had been a former colleague of mine in another department. We had shared lunch breaks and casual conversations, but she had left the company about a year ago. At the time, I had thought nothing of it. She was one of those who preferred to avoid office drama. But now her subject line read, "Adil, I know what Cameron did to you. It's worse than you think." My fingers shook as I opened the message. Subject, "Adil, I know what Cameron did to you. It's worse than you think. Hey Adil, I've been keeping tabs since I left the company. I know you've been through hell with Cameron and Bilal. But there's something I found that I can't keep quiet about. Cameron isn't just using you as a scapegoat, he's been siphoning money from client accounts. There's a hidden ledger he keeps. I don't know how far he's gone with this, but I've seen it. It's all documented in his private files. I don't have all the details, but I thought you should know. There's more to the story than meets the eye. Let me know if you want to meet. This can't be swept under the rug." I stared at the email, the words blurring before my eyes. It was like something clicked into place. This wasn't just about an office rivalry. This was corporate fraud. Cameron hadn't just been undermining me. He had been embezzling company funds, possibly for years. I couldn't just ignore it. The wheels in my head were turning faster than I could process. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. If Cameron had been embezzling, he needed to pay for it. But to prove it, I'd need more than just a tip-off from Rena. I immediately called her. We set up a meeting for the next day, at a local cafe. Sitting there, across from her, the weight of it all felt heavier. She looked different, tired, haunted. She had the look of someone who had uncovered something far too big to ignore, but was too afraid to speak up. "I never wanted to get involved," Rena confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But after seeing Cameron's lifestyle after he left, his vacations, his new car, the house, I knew something wasn't right." I nodded. "What do you have?" "The proof." She pulled out a flash drive from her bag and slid it across the table. My hand trembled slightly as I took it. I didn't know what was on it, but my instinct screamed at me to take it and run. "It's everything I could find," she said quietly. "Bank transfers, account numbers, client invoices, and notes. He's been siphoning money from the clients, diverting some of their payments to off-the-record accounts. It's all there." I placed the flash drive in my pocket, a rush of cold adrenaline flooding my veins. I had what I needed. The game had changed. The next morning, I walked into the office with a purpose. My first stop was HR. I hadn't been officially reinstated in my previous role, but with Cameron suspended, it didn't matter. I had just one goal now: get the evidence to the right hands. The HR representative was startled to see me. "Adil, we haven't discussed your next steps yet. Are you?" "Not now," I interrupted, placing the flash drive on the desk. "There's something much bigger than your personnel review. You need to look at this." She raised an eyebrow but plugged the drive into her computer without asking questions. Seconds ticked by. The expression on her face shifted from curiosity to shock. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the files. "Adil, this is a lot. You realize what you're saying here, right?" I nodded. "It's all there. Cameron's been stealing from the company. The HR rep didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stood up and walked out of the room. When she returned, she was flanked by a security guard. "You need to come with us," she said, her voice tight. I stood, heart pounding in my chest, and followed her out of the office, the buzz of conversations fading as I moved down the hallway. The security guard led me to the boardroom, where Mr. Siddiqui was waiting. Cameron wasn't there, but I knew the storm was coming. I handed over the documents. "Cameron is gone, but the damage isn't over. This needs to be addressed immediately." Mr. Siddiqui stared at the files for a long time. Then, without a word, he picked up the phone and dialed. Within hours, the police had arrived, and Cameron was arrested. The magnitude of his fraud became clear to everyone. He had been embezzling from multiple clients, funneling millions into offshore accounts. It wasn't just an office issue, it was a criminal matter. And Bilal? He had been complicit. His termination was inevitable. As I walked out of the office that evening, the weight of the last few weeks settled over me. I had gone from the man everyone mocked to the one who exposed everything. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt cold. The battle was won, but the war had left its scars. I couldn't let go of the feeling that Cameron's fall wasn't just about business. It was about power, pride, and trust, how fragile it all was. And as I stood on the sidewalk, watching the city go on, I realized that I had one more question. Was I truly done? The answer came slowly, like a whisper in the back of my mind.
No.
This was just the beginning. Days had passed since Cameron's arrest, and the city seemed to have returned to its normal rhythm. But for me, everything had changed. I wasn't the same person who had walked into the office a month ago. I had done it. I had exposed the truth. Cameron was behind bars, and Bilal was out of the picture. But the satisfaction I thought I'd feel, it wasn't there. There was a lingering emptiness, a hollow victory that sat deep in my chest. The truth had come to light, but there was still something unresolved, a feeling that this wasn't the end. The days following Cameron's arrest were a blur of corporate meetings, lawyers, and press releases. I had been thrust into the role of a hero in the eyes of my colleagues, but it felt like a mask, something I wore to hide the weight of the betrayal and lies that had been uncovered. My phone buzzed constantly, both from work and from family, congratulating me on taking down the bad guy. But none of it felt real. In fact, it felt surreal. I kept thinking back to that moment when I walked into the boardroom with the flash drive. The overwhelming relief had been replaced by a creeping dread. It wasn't just Cameron. It was everything. The system. The lies we were all living under. The web of deceit stretched far beyond Cameron and Bilal. A week after the scandal broke, I received a cryptic call from an anonymous number. The voice on the other end was hushed and urgent. "A deal? You think this is over? You have no idea what's really happening." I felt my heart skip a beat.
Who is this?
"You're being watched. All of you. And you've made a dangerous move." I slammed the phone down, my pulse racing. Was this Cameron's last move? A final attempt to control the narrative? Or was there something even darker lurking beneath the surface? The voice had shaken me, but I couldn't afford to let it consume me. I had to focus on my next step, on rebuilding what Cameron had shattered. But the doubts started to creep in. Was everything really as it seemed? Was Cameron truly the villain in this story? Or had I just stepped into a much bigger game? I hadn't slept well in days. I could feel my mind unraveling, piece by piece. The phone call had done something to me. The quiet, disembodied warning echoed in my thoughts constantly. Every time I entered the office now, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. The walls seemed to close in, and the hum of the air conditioning felt like a constant reminder of the tension I was living with. It was as though everything had shifted into a strange, uncertain reality, and I couldn't find solid ground. I began to question my own actions. The decisions I had made, exposing Cameron, confronting him, going to HR, had they been driven by a genuine desire for justice? Or had I been playing into something I didn't fully understand? People around me noticed my unease. Colleagues who used to greet me with smiles now gave me strange, hesitant looks. It was as though they too were waiting for something, waiting for me to crack or for the other shoe to drop. The office felt colder now, its walls seemingly filled with unspoken judgments. The whispers never stopped. People weren't sure what was going to happen next, and they weren't sure how to react to me anymore. Then, one afternoon, as I was gathering some papers from the filing cabinet, I came across something that would change everything. It was a folder, one I hadn't seen before. The name on the front was unfamiliar, but it was marked with an official stamp. Confidential. Internal Audit Review. Curiosity overpowered me. I pulled the folder from the shelf and opened it. Inside were dozens of documents, spreadsheets, and reports, financial data that seemed too detailed to be a random audit. As I flipped through the pages, one word kept repeating: diverted funds. The numbers didn't add up. Cameron's activities, while criminal, were only a small part of the bigger picture. What struck me was a set of payments to offshore accounts, payments tied not just to Cameron but to every senior executive in the company. I stumbled back in shock. This wasn't just Cameron's fraud. It was company-wide. This was a carefully orchestrated money laundering scheme involving multiple levels of the organization, people who I had trusted and worked alongside for years. And then, at the bottom of the last page, there was a single, chilling line in bold. A deal, you're the last piece. You don't know what you've walked into. The words struck like lightning. It wasn't just about exposing Cameron anymore. This wasn't a simple case of fraud. This was something much deeper, much more dangerous. I had been used. I had been manipulated into taking down Cameron, while the real perpetrators had remained in the shadows, operating from behind closed doors. I stood in the middle of the office, the weight of the folder in my hands, the realization crashing down on me. I wasn't just a pawn in their game. I was now the target. My phone buzzed again. It was another anonymous message. It's not over. You've only just begun to see the truth. I froze. I knew what I had to do next, but the cost would be unimaginable. I wasn't going to walk away from this. I dialed the only number I trusted, the lawyer I had contacted when Cameron first started his campaign against me. This goes deeper than I thought, I whispered into the phone. I need protection. As I left the office, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The city felt too small, the walls closing in on me. I turned a corner, but just as I did, I saw something that made my heart stop. A car parked across the street, its headlights dimmed. Was I being followed? I turned the corner, but in the back of my mind I knew this was only the beginning. The truth would cost me everything.